This game was crazy. All right, this game was crazy. In the first half, the Indiana Fever looked amazing. They were hot, on fire. I could have sworn their jerseys was on fire the way that they were balling. Yo, when I say they were shooting the lights out, let's give it up for Lexi. In that first quarter, it was Lexi's game. Can I get a whole yeah? That's what was going on in that first quarter, fam. And she was just completely...
Lexi Hull shocked everyone with a breakout performance, stepping up when the injury-plagued Indiana Fever needed her most. Playing fearless, she delivered a career night that has fans buzzing and critics questioning how long this resilient team can keep fighting through setbacks. Hull's moment wasn't just big, it might change the Fever's season. 2.
Set at 164.5. Lexi Hull dials up a 3.
Before we dive deeper, let's pause for a question. Was Lexi Hull's breakout just a lucky night, or the beginning of her rise as a true force for Indiana? Let me know in the comments, because this one's up for debate. Now, here's the reality. The Fever are in crisis. They've already lost 4 rotation players. Caitlin Clark, sidelined since July 15th with a groin injury. Sophie Cunningham, out with a torn MCL. Sydney Coulson, down with an ACL tear. And Ari McDonald, dealing with a foot issue. That's devastating enough. But against Minnesota, the situation somehow got worse. Chloe Beebe was scratched after knee soreness in warm-ups, while Odyssey Sims went down in the fourth quarter and never returned. That makes 6 players out. 6 on a roster already battling for survival. Simply put, it's catastrophic.
But we're right there. So I think we can head into Sunday's game with a little bit of confidence on competing against anybody.
And yet, right in the middle of all that chaos, Lexi Hull rose to the occasion and delivered the game of her life. The injuries didn't rattle her, nor did the heavy responsibility of filling roles she normally wouldn't. Instead, she embraced the challenge with confidence, carrying herself like she knew this was her moment. From the opening tip, Hull played with clear intent. Her shots were smooth, her cuts decisive, and her energy relentless. She wasn't waiting for chances to come, she was creating them. That fearless mindset changed everything.
Defense was there, the hustle was there. I liked everything about what was going on in the first quarter. They were just outplaying the Lynx. They looked really good, right? And then we get to that second quarter. Second quarter, I loved how the entire team turned on fire. I mean, they were on fire, scorching, heating it up.
By halftime, Lexi Hull had already poured in 18 points. The kind of output you'd normally expect from Kelsey Mitchell or Caitlin Clark when they're healthy. Each bucket fueled her confidence, and that energy radiated to the rest of the team. Hull wasn't tentative or second-guessing, she was fearless. Sprinting through open lanes, pulling up for threes without hesitation, and forcing Minnesota's defense into chaos, she kept the Fever alive. The bench erupted after every shot, feeding off her momentum. Fans watching from home could feel it too. The belief was real.
Time in her career as Boston goes backdoor to Hull, working on Williams. Hull gets it.
Here's the thing. Lexi Hull wasn't just putting up empty numbers or padding her stats in garbage time. Every single point she scored came in the natural flow of the game, while Indiana was battling Minnesota possession for possession. She delivered when it mattered most, with the game hanging in the balance and real pressure on her shoulders. That's what made her night so impressive. It wasn't luck. And it certainly wasn't stat chasing, it was meaningful production in high-stakes minutes. And honestly, this raises a real question. Why has Hull been pushed to the back burner so often this season? Head coach Stephanie White has leaned heavily on Sophie Cunningham, Kelsey Mitchell, and Caitlin Clark when they've been available, leaving Hull to a supporting role. But on this night, with the roster stripped to its bones, Hull proved she's capable of so much more than just spotting up in the corner or giving hustle minutes. She showed she can be a focal point, even against one of the deepest teams in the WNBA. Post-game, her comments summed it up perfectly. Asked about her mindset, Hull admitted she knew she had to step up. We're missing people, so everyone's got to do a little bit extra, be a little bit more aggressive offensively. That was my mindset going in. That's not just a player filling minutes. That's a player recognizing the gravity of the moment and leaning into it. Stephanie White noticed it too. She praised Hull's aggressiveness, how she hunted her shots instead of waiting to be fed the ball. That's been the knock on Hull before, that she can fade into the background when others dominate the offense. But in this game, she flipped that script. She set the tone, forced defenders to respect her, and created space for teammates simply by demanding attention herself. And the numbers back it all up. Hull finished with 23 points on 9 of 16 shooting, including 4 of 7 from 3, while logging nearly 37 minutes. That's not just efficient, that's carrying a heavy load and still delivering at an elite clip. Most importantly, she looked comfortable doing it. No panic, no hesitation. She looked like she had been waiting for this exact moment all along.
Unbelievable third quarter from Stephanie White. Coming out, once again, I will never back off of this. If you come out flat in the third quarter, if you give up leads in the third quarter, I'm going to question you as a coach. Because what is it are you doing at halftime? It's clear. What happens is, the team that's down goes in, they make adjustments at halftime. They come back out. They apply those adjustments. The coach that is winning the game needs to be prepared to be able to make an adjustment to their adjustment. Because the adjustment is coming. Yeah, Stephanie White, no, I don't do that. That's above my pay grade.
But here's where things get frustrating. As brilliant as Lexi Hull's career night was, her performance alone couldn't mask the glaring holes left by 6 missing players. And that's where the conversation shifts. Because while it's easy to celebrate Hull's outburst, the deeper story is about the Indiana Fever as a whole, and how injuries, rotations, and questionable coaching decisions are slowly ripping this team apart. Think about it. No team in the league has been hit harder by injuries. The Fever aren't just short-handed, they're running lineups that look like patchwork experiments, held together by hardship signees and last-minute substitutions. Every night feels like survival basketball, and against a deep, physical team like Minnesota, those cracks were bound to split wide open. That's exactly what happened here. Take Shea Petty, for example. She joined the Fever literally days ago on a hardship contract, and in her debut, she gave them a respectable 10 points, drilling 3 of 4 from deep. That's admirable under the circumstances, but expecting her to step in and run the offense seamlessly? Unrealistic. She barely had time to learn the playbook, and that lack of chemistry showed on the court. Possessions that normally flow with Caitlin Clark initiating the action now stalled out. Aaliyah Boston fought for position inside, but passes arrived late or at awkward angles. Plays broke down, and instead of crisp execution, Indiana was left with rushed jumpers or flat-out turnovers. By the third quarter, the fatigue was obvious. Rotations lagged, defensive closeouts were a step slow, and Minnesota pounced. They outscored Indiana 32-7 in that frame alone, flipping the game on its head and killing all momentum. Here's the tough part. It wasn't a one-off collapse. This has been a recurring theme for the Fever all season long. Strong first halves, competitive energy, then the same nightmare repeat, a disastrous third quarter where opponents adjust and Indiana doesn't. And that points directly to coaching. Fans have been vocal about Stephanie White's lack of in-game adjustments, and this matchup gave them more ammo. Minnesota spread the floor, attacked with straight-line drives, and punished Indiana relentlessly on the offensive glass. Meanwhile, the Fever stuck with the same defensive coverages, even though it was clear they weren't working. That's stubbornness, plain and simple. Now let's talk about Boston, because her night was a mixed bag. Statistically, she finished with 15 points and 6 rebounds. On paper, that's serviceable. But for long stretches, she looked passive. Too often she drifted to the three-point line, standing instead of planting herself in the paint. For a player who's supposed to be the interior anchor, that passivity drew criticism. Fans and analysts alike noted how invisible she seemed until late in the fourth quarter, when she suddenly woke up and rattled off 8 points in a short burst. But by then, the damage was done. The game was already slipping away. Boston can't afford to ghost through 3 quarters and then expect to rescue the team in the final minutes. Not when Clark is sidelined. Not when Cunningham is sidelined. Not when half the roster is held together by hardship contracts. Meanwhile, Kelsey Mitchell was the one constant. She did her job and then some, dropping 27 points and dishing 5 assists. She kept the offense alive, forcing Minnesota to respect her shot every time she touched the ball. But she couldn't do it alone. She needed Boston to stand tall as her co-star. Instead, Mitchell got Hull as the secondary scorer. That's not necessarily bad. Hull's explosion was huge for her confidence. But it exposed how unbalanced this roster really is when the stars aren't aligned. And then there was Natasha Howard, who had a night to forget. In moments where she was asked to initiate offense, things unraveled quickly. 2 trips bringing the ball up court resulted in 1 turnover and 1 offensive foul. That's not her role, and it showed. Worse, she was completely outplayed inside. Jessica Shepard flat-out dominated her, logging a triple-double, 22 points, 11 rebounds, 11 assists. Shepard controlled the game, looked like the best big on the court, and that's a problem when Indiana's supposed to have the stronger frontcourt duo in Boston and Howard. Minnesota also got huge contributions from Kayla McBride, who torched the Fever for 29 points, and Natisha Heedman, who came off the bench to drop 17. Every time Indiana made a push, one of those 2 answered with a back-breaking shot. That's the difference between a team built with depth and a team scrambling with patchwork lineups. So yes, Hull's performance was incredible. Yes, Mitchell battled hard. And yes, Shea Petty gave them a surprising spark. But when you're missing 6 rotation players, individual efforts can only take you so far. The Fever simply don't have the margin for error to survive nights like this, where Boston fades, Howard gets exposed, and the coaching staff refuses to adjust when the opponent shifts gears. The schedule doesn't get easier either. Indiana faces Minnesota again in just a few days, this time on the road. After that, Seattle, Phoenix, Atlanta, Los Angeles, and Las Vegas, all teams clawing for playoff positioning. Without Clark, without Cunningham, without half their core, the odds of sneaking into the postseason shrink by the day. And that's what makes Hull's night such a bittersweet silver lining. On the one hand, she proved she can handle bigger minutes, a bigger scoring load, and more responsibility than she's been given all season. On the other hand, even her best wasn't enough to pull Indiana through. When Odyssey Sims went down late in the 4th, it highlighted just how fragile this roster has become. The coaching staff had no choice but to hand the keys to Shea Petty, who, again, had barely unpacked her bags, just to keep the offense running. That's not strategy, that's desperation. And Minnesota feasted on it. They hammered Indiana with straight-line drives, stretched the floor for wide-open looks, and pounded the offensive glass for second-chance points. Indiana's defense, worn down by heavy minutes, collapsed. Rotations were late, closeouts were lazy, and Boston found herself in impossible situations, guarding multiple players at once under the rim. The Lynx smelled blood and delivered the knockout with that 32-7 third quarter. What makes it all the more frustrating is that the Fever actually looked competitive in the first half. They hit from deep, Hull was electric, Mitchell was steady, and the team played with fight. But once adjustments came into play, Minnesota shifted gears while Indiana stayed stuck. That's been the season-long pattern: strong starts, weak finishes. Hull's career night should have been a game-changer. Instead, it was reduced to a footnote in another collapse. Because one player, no matter how hot, can't carry an entire team. Indiana needed Boston to dominate, and she didn't. They needed Howard to protect the paint, and she couldn't. They needed White to make changes, and she wouldn't. So Hull's explosion becomes less of a breakthrough moment for the team, and more of a silver lining for her personal development. Now let's zoom out. Indiana is still clinging to 6th place, but the margin is razor thin. Reports say they're just half a game ahead of 7th, and barely a game and a half clear of 9th. That's dangerous territory. Every collapse shrinks their playoff window, and without Clark, that window could slam shut entirely. But for Hull personally, this might be the best thing to happen in her career. She showed she can handle volume, shot creation, and defensive attention. She showed she's more than just a role player hiding in the corner. That matters, not just for the remainder of this season, but for her future role on this team. And it raises a fascinating question. When Clark returns, what happens to Hull's role? Does Stephanie White continue giving her more touches and opportunities? Or does she slide her back into the shadows? Because after a performance like this, burying her again would risk killing the confidence she just unlocked. Meanwhile, Kelsey Mitchell deserves every bit of credit. She's carried this team more than anyone since Clark went down, and once again, she delivered under pressure. Dropping 27 points against a defense locked in on you isn't easy. Her consistency, paired with Hull's emergence, at least gave Indiana a fighting chance. Without them, this game would have been over before halftime. But let's not sugarcoat it. The defense is a disaster. Indiana gave up 95 points, and it could have been worse if McBride hadn't missed a couple of wide-open looks late. For a coach brought in with a reputation for defensive schemes, Stephanie White's system just isn't holding up. If the Fever sneak into the playoffs, it won't be because of defense. It'll be because of pure offensive firepower and Clark's eventual return. The bigger issue? This roster feels cursed. Cunningham out. Coulson out. McDonald out. Clark out. Now Sims and Chloe Beebe added to the list. That's 6 rotation players sidelined. No team survives that without major damage. Indiana has fought admirably, but the cracks are showing. Even their brightest moments, like Hull's career night, are overshadowed by injuries and recurring collapses. Flashes of promise are nice, but flashes don't win playoff races. So yes, Hull's explosion was special. Yes, it's a reason for optimism. But until Indiana solves its injury crisis, fixes its third-quarter woes, and finds leadership on both ends of the floor, the Fever's playoff dreams are hanging by a thread. And for Hull, the real story isn't just what she did on this night. It's what happens next. Because if she continues playing with this confidence, Indiana might have found a long-term difference maker hiding in plain sight.